Welcome to the Upshot, Ultra Disc Golf's podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. I'm the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Josh Mansfield, and we have an extra special guest today. Welcome back to the program, Daniel Prentice. Daniel, it's great to have you. How are you?
I'm doing good, Charlie. Thanks so much for having me. I have to say, the disc golf shop I work at here in North Carolina, people are always asking me, when are you be on the Upshot again? When are you go back on the Upshot? So now I finally get to say, hey, I'm back on the Upshot.
Well, you might be making more regular appearances here in the next few weeks as, I don't know, I might have to take a couple weeks off. We'll see.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know why I would have to do that, but...
Just that time of year, Charlie, you know?
Yeah.
The holidays.
So we've got to talk about our fantasy draft and do the update from the beginning of the year. So we'll run it down. We'll remind everybody what the teams are and how it all broke down, who won, etc. But let's take a second before we get to that. Just a little quick news. The PDGA released the 2024 A-tier schedule. 225 A-tiers next year, starting basically beginning of January all the way until middle of December. So a full calendar of A-tiers. And I think the most interesting thing, guys, I was wondering what was going to happen with this. The Las Vegas Challenge, which, of course, when the news came out about the 2024 Pro Tour schedule, they came out on social media and were like, we're shocked, we weren't informed, we're very upset, and so, like, kind of dramatic, removal from the tour. They have completely moved their dates. So they are now going to be in April, in between Jonesboro and OTB. Or is it DDO and OTB? I think it's DDO.
DDO and OTB.
Yeah. So they will basically be on the way on a weekend where there's no other Pro Tour stops. And so I'm thinking we're going to see a lot of pros at this tournament again. What do you think?
I think you're right, and I think it's also incredibly smart of them to do so, because if it shows that there is an option for how the LVC could be a part of the tour again without necessarily being a kickoff point, that it could be an in-between stop on your way to the West Coast swing, and by keeping itself there and kind of establishing it as that's kind of the weekend that's going to work around, it creates an opportunity for the door to open back up in the future. So if I think that's a hats off to the tour director over there for planning around that and making sure that, if they're able to kind of keep themselves relevant on this tour scene.
It'll be nice to see LVC with maybe some nice weather as well.
Yeah, it's a little chilly in early February. May. Sorry, I said April, but it's early May. May 9th to 12th. Could be hot. We'll see. Vegas gets hot fast, and it can be kind of insufferable if it is really hot. But we will find out. Also, this was actually originally in the A-tier release and then removed, edited out of it. But the Cascade Challenge was listed as a DGPT Q Series stop. So we haven't really gotten full details yet about this new Q Series, but essentially it's going to be probably mostly, if not entirely, A-tiers that comprise opportunities to earn separate qualifying points to earn a 2025 tour card. So we know, based on what we've seen, Cascade Challenge and the Kansas City Wide Open are going to be Q Series stops, which those were silvers last year. So this is the new silver series, So it was Silver Series, then it was Silver, and now it's Q Series. Next year it'll be Q.
Easy, Charlie. That acronym's taken.
I don't know that there's much to make of this, but I feel like this has been the slow, inevitable march for this kind of second series of tournaments,
and one that disincentivizes pros from playing in it. That doesn't offer tour points towards the tour championship. That doesn't have minimum payout requirements. I don't know if Silvers did or not, but right, like things that typically create a incentive for pros to come play. I'm hoping that Q series is going to be lacking.
Josh, as a note, for Purse Watch next year, we should track Q Series payouts and compare them to silvers from the past. I will be interested to see if if they stay at the same level, if they are much lower. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, presumably a lot of those tournaments are going to be interested in moving to the Pro Tour eventually. So we'll see. Okay, one other thing before we get into fantasy draft talk. We got a beef. I got beef. I don't know how this happened, but there's beef. Over on the Tour Life podcast, Brody Smith and Paul Ulibarri's show, they clipped my discussion of Yuli's discussion of the value of a world championship. And I'll play... You'll have to listen to their whole show if you want everything, because it's kind of a long clip. But I'll play some snippets from what Yuli had to say about what I had to say about what he had to say. Listen.
This guy just went in circles. What is he talking about?
What do you have to say about that?
I think it's hilarious because, first of all, the one person who does know how important the World Championships is me. I haven't won it, but I hold it in the highest regard, just like every single player does in the entire planet. Is that correct, though? Is that correct? No. We play golf. We structured our entire sport around golf, which is paved the way through with 4 majors and then elite series just like we have. We're going that route.
Mm-hmm.
Having one tournament that is by far and away the number one, the end-all, be-all tournaments of all time ever. It's to the point of this. When I first started, the only way you could possibly make money is by winning that tournament. That has changed now. And it hasn't changed because more people have won the World Championships. It's changed because more people can get their name on a disc and then sell that disc more than anybody else who's won the World Championship. There are players that can do that. How is that a thing? You get one chance a year. Let's say you have a brilliant career and you play 15 years at the top level and just so happen that you don't get your one spot at the World Championships. Is that fair? Is that a fair thing? I don't think so. Let's say you don't win Worlds and you win 15 U.S. titles, though, in that time. That person is not going to make as much money, especially back in the day, as the person who wins all the World Championships. Is that fair? If I had to choose a tournament to win, I would choose the World Championship. Do I think that they should all be equal? Yes, that's just logic on my part of being around and competing at a high level for almost 15 years.
All right, so I got accused of talking in circles, even though I will succinctly make my point again. There is always going to be one tournament that is valued the most. There's nothing you can do about that. And the fact is that the World Championships, because of its long history, because it was the first major, because of what we have just bestowed upon it as this important event, the most important event on the calendar, it's always going to have that legacy, at least for the foreseeable future. And I think it is both valid to say that it is the one that matters the most, and to say that winning it doesn't mean that you're automatically the best player on the planet. Like, it still is just one of the many tournaments that they play. It is one of 4 majors, but it is still the most valuable of those majors, and most people are building their season around peaking to try to win the World Championships. So, honestly, I don't necessarily think Yuli and I disagree all that much. That's kind of what my take on it is. Like, he's acknowledging that it matters the most, but then he's saying, but should it matter the most? And I guess my answer is yes, it should matter the most, but it doesn't mean that it has to matter so much more that we ignore everything else.
I also think Yuli's claim of you can't get your name on a disc unless you win Worlds is just from a whole nother era. Like, I look at guys who haven't won Worlds, Nate Sexton, Simon Lizotte, Eagle McMahon. Like that era is so far gone because Sexton Firebirds have been popular for years. I mean, that's been one of the premier drops, right? Jomez, I think, was an avenue. So we're probably talking 5-6 years that I don't think I can think of names right off the bat that I think disprove Yuli's point that you have to win Worlds to get your name on a disc.
But just to push back, do they make non-Sexton stock Firebirds?
I
genuinely don't know. I assume they do. I think Yuli's point is that to get on stock discs, you got to win Worlds.
Yeah, and for the T-Bird to have, Ken Climo on it or whatever.
Sure.
Signature
or Avery
disc.
Jenkins.
Right. There's Tour Series stuff, and
right.
Everybody gets a Tour Series disc these days.
Yeah.
But then there's stock run. You get a portion of all discs sold in that category, and not just the ones that are Tour Series. Josh, you're right that the lines have blurred a lot in the last few years, but it's not clear to me that there's still that ability to get a straight up, stock run disc with your name on it.
And that might be true unless you live in Worlds. But I mean, Simon's the proof that you can, because I mean, you have the Simon line that I don't know if you'd call them Tour Series. They're stock run discs now.
Yeah,
and it's true.
But so Simon really is the proof to me that that's not the case. And he says, that's the only way that you can make a career and make money out of it. And that used to be true, but that's just not anymore. And so even if Champions Cup isn't as important of an event or as important of a major, that doesn't mean that the winner of Champions Cup isn't going to also be able to go out and secure a good contract and have discs that give them royalties and have a popular disc. I think social media influence and ability to get media like Jomez is far more important than even winning Worlds is anymore. And I mean, look at Greg Barsby. I don't think his career is an illustrious one of just glamour and riches now because he won Worlds. It's so either way I look at it, I see players who haven't won Worlds who have massively successful careers, players who have won Worlds who I don't think are massively successful financially.
I think the thing that's a little silly is my read of the argument. I don't listen to the show, so I don't know the full argument that Yuli has, but it seems like he wants all majors to be this considered on the same par, as opposed to Worlds being elevated. But why are we then elevating majors ahead of every other tournament? Because that's equally as arbitrary as making Worlds, isn't it?
Well, I think, I would just point to the fact that I ultimately came down on Calvin as being the player of the year this year, despite the fact that Isaac Robinson won 2 majors, including Worlds. Mm-hmm. And I mean, obviously it was close because we do value the majors, but I wouldn't necessarily say that the fact that Isaac won Worlds was some huge tipping point thing versus if he'd, let's say, won USDGC instead of Worlds. It still would have been 2 majors in my mind. Yeah. And you got to give him credit because winning Worlds is harder, right? It's 5 rounds. I like that we have this, that we acknowledge the history of this event. Mm-hmm. And it gets that extra round, and that we kind of have this nod to the past, because that's what the tradition of the sport is. And I don't really understand. Here's the thing, right? Brody specifically, I think, influences Yuli in his never-ending quest to make everything like golf. And to be fair, I, in many cases, agree with Brody about let's make things more like golf. But there are things that are disc golf specific that we should keep disc golf specific, and we shouldn't try to make like golf. And I think this is one of those things. And by the way, in golf, if you're talking to me, a casual, admittedly, the Masters is the most important major. Sure, I respect that the other people win the other majors, and I look at the overall stats the same as I do in disc golf, but if someone wins the Masters, that to me, that's the most important. Just saying. And by the way,
the other problem I have real fast that I want to add is his solution is whoever earns the most Pro Tour points at the end wins. So an American wins Worlds guaranteed for the rest of time. The infrastructure around, if we had an equitable tour, so think Formula One, for example, right? All Formula One drivers have an equal access to competing in all the events all year long. So naming the winner like the champion, based on the tour makes sense. It doesn't make sense in disc golf because if Henna and Evelina leave for 2 months from the tour and aren't accumulating points, then they're never going to have a shot at it when Henna has shown us that she can show up and has the capacity to compete and play well at Worlds. Like, disc golf does not have the financial structure right now. And what happens is that continues to expand, right? When we get players from Mexico who come up and play in the World Championships, and we get Canadians who come down and play, who are excellent players who can't afford to come tour full time or aren't interested in touring full time, but have the option to come play the World Championships and can compete on that level. Like, I think that right should be there for them until the money is there to make this a full profession for every player.
I think we can all agree that it's a little silly that it's called the World Championships. That's like the thing. It's like, you're the world champion because you win one tournament. I mean, I get why that's weird. And having it every year, you know? Mm-hmm. In Ultimate, the World Championships happen every 4 years. It's like the Olympics. It's just an important tournament, and it's called the World Championships. It's great. It's the number one tournament to win. There's always going to be one.
Yep.
Here is my peace offering. Discraft sent me a Captain's Raptor. Very nice. Soon, I will have a beautiful new backdrop filled with discs from various companies. And so if you would like to have one of your discs appearing in the background of this beautiful pink blah behind me right now, contact me at upshot@ultiworld.com. So, cool disc. Yuli, I think we're pretty much on the same page, ultimately. All right. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, fantasy draft recap time. Can't believe Josh got to pick Kristen. It's so frustrating. We'll be back.
At Pound, the quality of our gear runs deeper than the stitching. That's why we make everything right here in the US, employing highly skilled, well-paid professionals. From bomb-proof Cordura fabric to YKK zippers and recycled plastics, we source the highest quality US materials to make the most comfortable, durable pack in disc golf. Our lifetime warranty stays with the pack, not the purchaser. So regardless of how you find us, we will be here to make sure your pack stays on the course and out of the landfill. Pound's integrity is held together with more than just thread.
Welcome back to the Upshot. It's time to take a look back at our preseason fantasy draft. Daniel, we had you on, was it early February, I think? Maybe
early
late
February,
January?
yeah.
Early February. We made our picks. We drafted our players. You are the host of the Drafted podcast, so if people are looking for more drafts, check it out. I see I missed the memo on 5-panel hats. You have the drafted hat. Josh has the cool geometric design hat.
Yeah.
Got to get the Ulti World Disc Golf 5-panel going. What am I doing?
Those would be sick.
Is that a merch tease, Charlie?
Yeah, but like the tease,
it's the long term.
I don't know when. That's right. So let's take a look at our picks here, and I'm not sure what the best way to do this is. I mean, maybe I'll just hit some highlights, and then we'll go through each of the individual teams just to keep it clear. Josh was the first overall pick. I was second. Daniel was third. Josh took Kristen Tatar number 1 overall. I took Ricky Wysocki, and Daniel picked Paul Macbeth. It's funny in hindsight to think about what the preseason expectations were for everybody. And so,
I don't think Daniel thinks it's funny.
Yeah, it was a tough year out there for my squad.
So here were the teams outright. Josh had Kristen, Ella Hansen, Owen Scoggins, Henna Blomroos, and Macy Vela Diaz on his FPO team. I had Katrina Allen, Valerie Mondahano, Evelina Salonen, Haley King, and Holland Handley. And Daniel had Paige Pierce, Missy Gannon, Kat Murch, Sarah Hokum, and Alexis Mondahano. On the MPO side, Josh took Eagle McMahon, Gannon Burr, Kevin Jones, Isaac Robinson, and Nico Locastro. I had Ricky Wysocki, Calvin Heimberg, Simon Lizotte, Matty O, and Anthony Barella. And Daniel had Paul Macbeth, Chris Dickerson, Kyle Klein, Joel Freeman, and Corey Ellis. Man, Daniel, a lot of regression from players that you picked who had really good 2022s.
Yeah.
And didn't bring it this year.
Yeah, just didn't bring it at all. Just filled with regret in looking back at my picks. I think I gotta get a scratch for Paige and Paul. And I remember saying at the time when I picked Paige, that I was like, I'm a little worried that we've maybe hit the downslope for Paige. But the big thing I think for her this year was just the injury, and then Paul, hardly played in anything too. So that was tough. Once they both kind of wrapped up their seasons, I knew it was over for me.
I mean, it is worth noting Paige got 2 wins.
Yeah,
it so like she was wash from her. She was likely to be the second best FPO pick after Kristen had she played a full season.
Yeah, tough.
So that's tough. That's tough.
But yeah, guys like Corey Ellis and Corey got me a win, but was still way worse than he was last year. Joel Freeman, huge drop off from last year. I don't know what happened with those guys. We'll have to assess in the off season.
Chris Dickerson even. Massive regression all around the board.
Chris is the most frustrating one. I was just super high on the year he was going to have. I had it in my brain because he kind of had like a kind of low key 2022, and I convinced myself, it's like first year with a new manufacturer. He's going to be playing more this year. He's going to get back to, the form we saw from him like 2020, 2021 when he wasn't playing as much. And it just didn't happen. So I don't know if he's just like, if this is the player that he is, which is still a very talented player, but not a guy who is like, winning tournaments and consistently pushing for podiums at really big events. I'm not sure. I feel like he's one that where do you guys stand on Chris? What do you think he's going to be next year?
I think he could. Okay, here's the thing. He could have had a win. I still think he could win next season, but I think in terms of placement, his consistency is just not as high of a consistency level as some of the other players that we now know for consistency, like Gannon and even Isaac, right? And Calvin. Like Chris used to be that guy who was always in second place, and now Chris is that guy who's consistently in the top 10. And he still could get a win, but I think you're right that we might have seen like just who Chris is now and the field's just more competitive.
I had this hot take for a long time. It's like, Chris is like sneaky secret top like 3-4 player in the world. He just doesn't play as much as the other people do because when he wasn't doing any of the West Coast stuff. Mm-hmm. And now I feel like I obviously I can't feel that way anymore, which is kind of a bummer, because I really like the way he plays. Like when he's playing well, he's just a super fun dude to watch. It feels like we don't get the best Chris as often as I would like.
So let's take a look at the stats really quick, because I think it's useful to try to assess, like, has there been actual play regression or is it just the field getting better? So this year, Dickerson was 41-66 in Circle 1 and Circle 2 in regulation, and then 87-26 in putting. Okay, let's go back to 2021. He was 46-69 and 82-25. So his Circle 2 putting has dipped a little bit, but otherwise he's like the same player.
Yeah.
I think it's just harder to win these days.
Everyone else is just
more
better.
players are better.
Yeah, fair.
Okay, well, let's actually talk about who won. Our assessment was number of wins of your team, and then the average Pro Tour standing of your team. And then you could get 3, 2, or 1 points in each category just based on rank order. So there was no advantage to winning by a lot or losing by a little. It was just 3, 2, 1. First place gets 3 points, etc. So Josh easily wins in FPO. He gets all 6 points available, with really Kristen leading the charge. Now, to be fair, he had 2 other top 5 players in Owen Scoggins and Ella Hansen. But Kristen, finishing number 1 overall, 9 wins on the season, just absolutely obliterates everybody else. I took second in both categories, so I took 4 points. 4 of my 5 players got wins.
That's so
Katrina,
impressive.
Valerie, Haley, and Holland. Only Evelina Salonen did not get me a win. Unfortunately, Evelina and Valerie both finished 25th or worse in the Pro Tour standings for different reasons, of course. But that cost me.
Yeah.
Daniel still got 5 wins. Paige, Missy, and Kat each getting you some wins, but really held back by Pierce finishing 33rd in the Pro Tour standings. I think you had a pretty good chance to beat me, Daniel, if Paige was healthy.
Stayed healthy. Yeah.
If Paige stays healthy, I think Daniel can win either category.
Possibly.
And that becomes important.
Because if she picks off 1 or 2 of Kristen's
I
wins,
at least could have tied for wins very realistically.
Yeah, one more win. That's all Paige needed.
Yeah.
on the MPO side, I took the win in both categories. I got 6 wins. 4 of my players got a win on the season. So 8 of my 10 picks won a tournament this year.
That's so impressive.
That's pretty good.
I'm pretty happy with that. Amazing. I got 5.4 average. That was the best Pro Tour standing average, even beating out Josh, who got 7.8 in FPO. All 5 of my players were inside the top 10.
Yeah.
Again, I had Ricky, Calvin, Simon, Matteo, and AB. Josh took second place in both. 5 wins, 3 from Gannon, 2 from Isaac Robinson. What an amazing late round Isaac Robinson pick.
8th round. End of the 8th round.
End of the 8th.
Dang.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Followed up by you picking Nicola Castro. And so Daniel finishes last in all categories. He gets 4 wins. Corey, Kyle Klein with a pair, and Macbeth. But a lot of players outside the top 20. Big regression from Joel Freeman, Chris Dickerson, as we discussed. So overall, Josh and I tie at 10 points apiece, and Daniel finishes with 4.
So I think tiebreaker should be total wins, right?
I love that idea.
I don't like that idea.
No, Charlie. Oh, no, I do get that. Yeah.
But I think that's fair.
Well, what's average? Let's do total wins and average place.
Most players of the win is what Charlie's about to say.
Players with a win. That's right.
What's our average of our average place in Pro Tour standings?
I think you're going to beat me, but it's going to be close.
That's real close.
It's like, I mean, we can do the math. So, Josh, yours was 9.4.
Yep.
Charlie, you should win this, right?
And mine was 10.1.
Oh.
So,
close.
But I think you could also make the argument that Charlie should win because he was second overall pick, not first.
That's just how it is. I mean, I don't think so.
No?
I'm happy with my picks. I feel like not being able to pick Kristen is a big handicap. And so I didn't really have a chance to win FPO. I don't really know how much better I could have picked an FPO. I don't think it would have been enough to overtake.
Well, I think your big problem is you smartly went. I think you made a mistake in picking players that go for wins, and you could have, if you'd picked like Owen and Missy, because both of those were on the board at your time.
Sure.
You then have 2, 3. You could have beat me in Pro Tour standings.
1 in the standings, yeah.
I think it's definitely questionable that I took Valerie Mondahano, like in retrospect. To be fair, we didn't know this.
She said she was going to be back by Waco.
Well, we knew that was not going to be true.
Right.
And so I knew that there was going to be an extended hiatus, but it was more extended than I anticipated. And then she just didn't really play at the same level that she had last year. So pretty risky for me to take her so high. I probably could have gotten her later. I took her in the 4th round. So
if I remember, I think you were just kind of clawing for wins, and it felt like there was hardly anybody left to get wins, and she felt like one. If I can recall your thought process at the time.
I mean, what's crazy is that I managed to get Haley King in the 7th round.
So I told this is my biggest blunder of the draft. It wasn't, being wrong about player seasons is one thing. I told Josh this when I off the air when I filled in for you, Charlie, the next week. I just completely forgot about Haley because when I was doing my prep, I was like, okay, I'm going to look at the players who finished top 32 or whatever in right. Pro Tour standings in 2022, and she didn't. Obviously, she just completely left. And then Charlie, you picked her, and I was like, oh no, I completely forgot about Haley King.
Yeah, I got my last 2 FPO picks were Haley King and Holland Handley. Huge. Which arguably were my 2 best picks of FPO.
Yeah.
I mean, Katrina got me 2 wins and finished 8th.
Not
Holland
arguably.
got me 1 win and finished 4th. And so, I don't know. Those are close.
If you compare, because Katrina and Valerie were your first 2 picks, and they were 2-8, 1-30, but Haley and Holland were 2-7, 1-4.
Yeah.
Not arguably, those 2 were better than your first 2.
Yeah.
What else stands out here? I feel like we should talk a little bit about the sequence of picks in MPO because that was interesting. I got Calvin as the 5th overall pick, which of course in retrospect looks like just crazy.
When I look at the players picked ahead of him though, I don't think it would. I mean, in retrospect, it does because of how good of a season he had. But picking Kristen Ricky Paul Page, that doesn't feel unbelievable to me that those shouldn't have been picked first at the beginning of the season.
That's 100% a hindsight thing to how did we let Calvin slip? It didn't feel crazy at the time, I don't think.
Well, I think once I hit my Eagle pick, that's when it starts should Katrina have gone before Missy? Probably, but if you wanted to go for standings, Missy wins a lot too, and I think that the narrative around Missy sometimes takes that away from her.
I'm trying to remember. I don't think we knew that at the time that Ricky was going to miss a lot of time this year
because he tried to start.
Yeah, he was going to play the All-Star, and then he dropped out of the All-Star, and then he played some, but he missed a lot of the early season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a ton.
And still managed to finish 4th in the Pro Tour standings, which is kind of hard to believe. He really played well down the stretch. I got Simon in the 5th round. So many people doubted Simon. I mean, you guys were haters.
Doubted.
You were straight haters. You were both ready for him to just suck. And 2 wins and 7th place finish. I mean, I think
he won
not
twice this
quite,
season.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Not quite as good as 2022, of course, when he won 4 times, but still a really good year.
Yeah, he was definitely the player I was most wrong about. And I remember, again, coming on the show when you were gone, Charlie, because he had a really bad LVC. And I was like, oh, yes, I was completely right about Simon. He's going to be a dud this year. And he still did the same kind of thing where it's he has his tournaments where it's like, Simon, what are you doing out there, man? But when he's playing well, he can win tournaments, and he did this year. So shout out to Simon. Easy dude to root for. Even though it was bad for my fantasy team, I was glad that he played really well this year.
It was bad for my fantasy. I feel like that's a line that people just say all the time now in all sports, even though it's bad for my fantasy. It's crazy. I think it's crazy how close this was to not being a tie. Paige stays healthy, and I think Daniel could win either in standings or wins on the FPO side. And then that takes it away. But on the MPO side, Paul plays and gets 1 more win, and I lose out on half a point as well, and then Charlie wins. And so both, Daniel had the chance to play spoiler with both of his top picks, and with both of them coming out, it slid everything over to Charlie. And I think Daniel, I even remember you saying off air, you're like, I'm probably not going to win any category, but my goal is just to win 2nd place in everything, and that and hope that one of you guys falters and I manage to slide into the 1-1 spot.
Yeah. I think Charlie complains about Josh getting getting first, but I think I really would have had to just go full Nostradamus to have any chance of winning from the third pick. I think, no Paige and Paul are going to get hurt. Know that Isaac doesn't have the huge breakout year that Calvin's going to be, have the year he has. So it's tough. I would like to see maybe some balancing with the way we do the scores, so that it doesn't feel like one player at the top pick.
Yeah, Christian is just
draft.
OP right now. It's just there's nothing to be done.
How do we change that?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think going away from the rotisserie style, where it's just like, you claim the most points by getting the most wins or whatever, and because the balance of the snake style draft is like, right, that like in theory the third and fourth best players are on par with the first and sixth, but obviously that's not true. So I think you have to try to kind of figure out a way to balance that with how you do the like get a certain amount of points for wins, maybe get like extra points for tour standing, something like that. I'm not super sure.
You know what I'm hearing Daniel say is that we need a fourth player to come in. And we just do head to head every single week.
Oh, wow. So I have wanted to be in a fantasy disc golf league, and I know that they exist like within the Discord and everything, but I've been trying to get like my friends to do it. And I don't love the way that like the standard scoring is done, at least to like the way I think it's done. I had a group a few years ago where my friend Chris LaRock, who former Frisbee famous, ultimate Frisbee famous person, is a disc golf guy now, and he did a full Excel spreadsheet with how they do fantasy golf, which is like you get points for birdies, eagles, lose points for bogeys, double bogeys, and then you also get points for like finish and everything. That it was a ton of work for him, and he didn't even sustain it for an entire season. But like if you like have the program that can do it, I feel like that is the optimal fantasy disc golf, because then it feels like every hole matters, right? Whereas rather than who wins and who has the best overall score at the end of the tournament or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll have to address it in the off season about how we want to structure it for next year, because it was fun, but I also didn't check in very often because I knew it was just total accumulation by the end of the year. Yeah. So I feel I have to find some kind of balance, like between overall season performance and like a week to week thing, so that it doesn't feel too unwieldy and we give up on it halfway through. But also that like there's a chance to fight back against Kristen Tatar. Okay. Besides Kristen, number one overall, what was the best pick in this draft? When you look at like where the pick happened, what the expectations were. I think I have my pick, but I want to hear what you think.
I think I know mine too, but
it has to be Isaac Robinson, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Isaac Robinson going in the 8th round, going
is it
2 wins,
round?
second in the standings. No, that's the 8th round.
8th round. You're right.
Yeah. Incredible, honnly.
Yeah.
Yeah. People just didn't expect him to have the year he had. I'm
happy with AB in the 10th round. But it's just not the same thing as 9th.
No, it's a good pick, but yeah.
Haley in the 8th.
Mm-hmm.
Solid.
I mean, Holland in the 9th.
Holland in the 9th was solid.
Charlie's last 4 rounds just real strong. they were better than his. I mean, I think better than his like
3 of my first 4 picks. Yeah. No, Evelina was a terrible pick. What was I thinking with Evelina? I guess my thought was that she would just like break out and start winning. But like a combination of her not playing as many Pro Tour events, which I could have predicted that, and then also not winning, it's just like I nuked myself.
I think you just wanted to be right about a hot take so bad.
So bad.
That you kind of got ahead of yourself with it.
So bad.
Well, and don't forget, like, I think Charlie started every show with "Welcome to the Upshot, the official podcast of the Evelina and Henna bandwagon. You heard it here first. They're going to win everything this season." Like, I'm pretty sure I remember that being the intro for like 2 months on repeat.
It was the intro, yeah.
And instead, they finished 20th and 25th in the standings with no wins.
Yeah,
they're still really good. Like, it's obviously misleading.
Henna
if they played a full season, they would both easily be top 10 players.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But still
probably wouldn't have wins.
Yeah,
I did my best to make them win. I picked them.
You got to
lots.
try a different strategy, Charlie.
I know. As soon as I bail, then that's when they'll win.
Yep. Evelina was too high, especially with Josh getting Henna a couple picks afterwards.
I know, it's a big mistake.
Feels a little bad. Yeah.
Who could I have taken that I didn't take? I don't know. I don't necessarily think, because my 4 picks were so good, it's not like I really blew it. I guess Isaac Robinson.
Yep.
But I don't think I would have seen it coming. I don't think anybody saw it coming.
Like I said, he didn't see it coming. I can't remember if it was on the Upshot, right? Or I can't remember if it was on the Upshot interview or like after he won one of the tournaments that he won. I feel like it was on this show where you guys asked him, like, did you expect to have the season you had? And he just basically said no.
Yeah. So let's take a look. Who are the best players that didn't get picked? We got to start with number 10 finisher in the Pro Tour standings with a win, Cole Redolin.
Yeah.
I feel like if we'd taken the rounds, like if we'd done 12 rounds, he might have gotten picked.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. He was like we saw him as like a high potential guy, but I don't think anybody saw him leveling up quite this much.
And I think he's kind of bundled in with like the Joel Freeman, Corey Ellis, Matty O, Anthony Barella, Nico, like that lower tier that were like some of these guys are going to get wins. They're going to finish inside the Pro Tour Championship. Which one's it going to be, right? And Cole got left off, and Adam Hammes is the other one that got left off. Both who had wins that were kind of in that group after I think the obvious picks were taken.
Who else? Who else did we miss on?
James Proctor.
Yeah,
I didn't get the wins, but just real nice, real solid, consistent.
11th
finish in the tour. Yeah, but that also felt like it kind of came, out of nowhere. It felt like.
I don't think James like if I had said, okay, Nico's not going to have a good season, not going to get a win, I'm going to swap Nico for somebody else. Like James Proctor would not have been my choice prior to this season.
Yeah.
I don't think we really missed much in FPO.
Yeah.
The first player that we didn't take in the standings was 11th, Jessica Weiss. She didn't win.
And the other thing, so remember, so we got all the top 10, and then Paige, who should be in the top, right? Who should be in the top 15. Valerie Mondahano, who without injury would be in the top 15, and then the 2 Europeans and Alexis Mondahano. Like that's, and Alexis had just come off of the really, really strong.
She missed a bunch
All-Star
of time
weekend
too. That's right.
She had the amazing All-Star weekend where she balled out and won the putting, and that's kind of, I think, got Daniel to select her. But I don't know who he takes instead. I mean, no one else had wins.
Is anybody going to take Allie Smith next year? I wonder. She finished 12th. Impressive. Getting better all the time.
I don't think she even podiumed at an Elite Series, though.
Yeah, she was kind of a volume shooter.
Yeah.
I thought that would be Evelina would be volume shooter.
Oh no.
Is that too harsh? See, I think we need to be harsh on Evelina.
Nobody putted more than Evelina this year.
Evelina got to play the most disc golf this season.
Let's see. Other names that maybe you would... Adam Hammes, he got a win this year.
He's the other one, I think, in MPO that
yeah, and I remember we shouted him out too. Like after the draft, we did kind of like who did we not pick analysis, and he was one of the ones that got mentioned as a guy who could win. So he didn't go totally unmentioned, at least.
You know what, Charlie? I still can't believe you didn't take Parker Welk. What a whiff. Were there any FPO wins that we did not get?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I don't think so.
There were the 3 in MPO.
Because Sai Ananda had the win, but it was a silver.
Yep.
I mean, it goes to show you that, like, ultimately we picked all of the top 10 finishers in FPO and 9 of the top 10 finishers in MPO in our picks. And we only picking 15 per division. So, like, it's not like we were way off,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's like there is consistency year to year. And, like, even when someone has, quote unquote, like a bad year, they're still playing well. Like, besides Macbeth and I guess Dickerson, it's not like people like massively underperformed. Just that, like, the level of expectations for players like Paige Pierce is that they are number one. And so when they finished whatever, obviously Paige was a way down, but if she'd finished 5th, it would have felt like shocking, like, regression, even though she's still really, really good. So that's just kind of like the expectations battle.
Here's a second thing that we should do next season that could make it interesting. Allow trades, but you only get the season after the trade. So wins, for example. So let's say I trade for Cole Radon. I trade Nico for Cole. I don't get Cole's win if I trade for him after his win, but I do get his Pro Tour. Or, like, we have to figure out how it would work with standing.
Is there like a waiver wire, or we can only trade players we've already selected?
Or sorry, wait, I meant waiver. Yeah, I was doing waiver wire.
Yeah.
So we do. I think with only 3 players, there's no incentive to trade. Like, I don't think there's a way to come out with a clean. It's very much zero sum, right? And so I think it's difficult.
I don't know. I think if somebody was looking to shore up their FPO team and they could afford to give away something in MPO, I could see it happening.
Yeah, the both divisions does make it interesting.
And, like, there's enough categories that, like, maybe you're doing well in one but need to fix another.
Okay.
It's an interesting idea.
I think trade where you can just trade the seasons, and then waiver wire where you can pick up but lose out on everything prior to it.
Okay.
I think that'd be interesting.
Charlie, I do want to visit one player. You're talking about players who regressed. Could you pull up the stats for Joel Freeman like you had for Chris Dickerson? Because to me, he felt like of all the players picked, the one who was, and maybe this is biased because he was on my team, but the most disappointing. I mean, he finished 7th in the Pro Tour in 2022, and he got a silver win. Is that right? I think.
Butler County.
And he had been a guy in the past. It's like you see him on some lead cards a couple of times, but to me it had felt like it's like, oh, okay, Joel has unlocked something here this year. Maybe he'll get a win for me and just be a real solid finisher in the Pro Tour standings. And he just didn't give me either of those things this year. Finished 24th, huge drop off, which middle round pick for me. I feel like really tanked my potential in MPO with the season he had.
All right, here you go. Circle 1, Circle 2 in regulation. Last year, 40-64. This year, 42-64. Okay.
So putting the same.
That was driving. That was Circle 1 and Circle 2 in regulation. Putting last year, 83-26. And this year, 81-23. And I'll note, he reworked his putt in the offseason. He switched to nose down. It didn't help. He actually putted worse this year. So a little bit worse on the putting. OB, it's a good thing to check. This year he was 53rd in OB rate at 9.3%. Last year he was 57th in OB rate at 9.4%. It's incredible how stable these numbers are year to year.
Yeah, what happened?
The field is so much better.
I think it's the combination of the quality of the field and also like that little bit of regression on putting actually I think makes a difference.
A huge difference. Yeah.
I think it makes a difference.
If you're missing 2 to 3 putts per round, or is it per round?
More like per tournament.
Probably per tournament. 3 putts per tournament. I mean, 3 strokes, especially because once you start getting in like 10th place to 20th place, that is very congested most times.
Yeah.
And 1 stroke can drop you 8 places because they're tied all right there. So
that's fair. Yeah. Fair.
Well, I guess some people must have just really leveled up for this to be as different as it was, I mean, like his birdie percentage this year was 41%. Last year, it was 39%. I mean, like, obviously course changes affect these numbers too, to an extent, but
yeah.
What was his bogey and worse this year?
Let's see. Last year, 11% over par. Mm-hmm. This year, 12% over par. So, I mean, again,
lots.
A couple of degrees of like that's, you could probably argue that's coming from the putting being a little bit worse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like from a numbers standpoint, this year he was 151st in Circle 1 putting. Last year he was 55th, despite finishing only 2 percentage points worse. So to me, that's showing you a rising level. Also, more players on tour than before, and yeah, I think it's just harder to be at the top.
2% as 100 places.
Yeah, and maybe those percentage points are bigger than they feel to us because we're assigning like external context to those 2 points. But maybe I mean two putts tournament does feel like a lot. When you think about it like that.
Let me give you the thing here. Last year, I'll do the actual math. Okay, wait, which year is this? 2022, he missed 118 Circle 1 putts. Okay, so that's just like from a total standpoint. 118 Circle 1 putts, that all Circle 1 putts included. This year, he missed 112.
He missed less this year.
Yeah. He had fewer, I guess he had slightly fewer Circle 1 putts. It's interesting.
It's a better field then.
Yeah.
Is that equating for number of events played? Those numbers?
No, it's not normalized. That's the raw totals.
Okay.
Totals, yeah. Interesting.
It's going to be amazing. Okay, let's look ahead.
Okay.
Who are the consensus early favorites for picks next year? We're not committing to anything. Just like when you think about like who are going to be some of the obvious picks to start next year, who do you look at?
Kristen.
Still, I think clearly number one.
Yep. And I remember Charlie, I don't know if it was just for show, to create some fun on the pod, but I feel like you pushed back on Kristen being the number one pick a little bit at the time. Do you remember this, Josh?
I don't remember this.
No? I do, and because I remember having to say no, she's the clear right choice. But I
remember you saying that,
yeah,
because I picked Kristen, and then I was like, man, is it more important to spend your number one overall pick on MPO? And then I was like, oh wait, I win 2 divisions by picking once in 2 categories by picking one person. Yep. That's the obvious choice.
Too strong. Calvin, I think would probably be like if you're repicking
consensus number
year.
1 pick, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think Isaac's going to get disrespected. That's my guess.
You think so?
A little bit. Is he the obvious number 2 pick? I mean, maybe he is. He finished second in the tour standings.
Oh, just for MPO, you mean?
I still think like Gannon might get picked over him.
I think Gannon is, I think, my number 1 MPO pick.
Number 1?
Ahead of Calvin.
Wow.
Well, look at in terms of the wins, like it's harder to get wins, and for him getting 3,
Calvin doesn't win.
I think Calvin could have a monster 2024.
He could.
He could, but he doesn't win.
Could have had a monster 2023, but
yeah. How old is Calvin?
25, 26.
I think
is he that young?
He's still in the late 20s at this point. Let me check. I always have to Google this.
The age.
We've got the article.
Yeah.
We can find out the facts.
How old are the competitors of the PDGA Pro World Championship?
He turned 27 this year.
Okay.
So, prime.
Yeah.
It's the heart of his prime, athletically. Well, it's going to be fun to do this again next year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Who are some regression candidates? Simon's 31. Page is 32.
Would you pick Matty, or like Matty-O you took in the 7th round? Would you take?
Macbeth is 33. Missy is 35. I'm just looking at the people who are on the older side. Matty-O is 36. Wow.
Own's in her 40s.
Cat 38. I'm never betting against Own again.
Yeah.
Nope. Can't do it.
Does Sarah Hokum get picked next year?
No.
I don't think so either.
Where'd she finish this year? 9th? That's still a
9th.
valuable pick to get a top 10
is.
player, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially because
Will
on the
she be there
FPO
next
side,
year?
on the FPO side, standings is where you really need to prioritize, I think.
Yeah,
Assuming it's
especially
similar.
if you don't get Kristen, it's like, okay,
All right.
I got to try to pick the 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 finishers.
Yep.
All right. Well, this was fun.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to doing it again next year, and we definitely we have to nerf Kristen. It's just there's no way around it.
Yeah. Well, I'll put my all of my draft expertise, brain power into figuring out a good scoring system that'll level the playing field a little bit.
Excellent.
Yep. And then crowdsource, send in emails.
Yep.
I want to finish the show with something that we were talking about off the air briefly, which is, Daniel, you asked, will we look back on this era of, let's say, like mid 2010s to now-ish,
Mhm.
and look at it and be like, wow, players were not good. Like when we're 10, 15 years from now looking back and we see the, players of the future. I mean, this was sparked because at the National Amateur Disc Golf Championships, in MA2, Colton Lawless, who's age 13, shot 984 event average and had his first ever 1,000 rated round to win MA2. And this kid is 13 years old. And like we keep talking about these players who are like 13, 12, who are shooting incredible rounds at this age. Are we going to look back and say, Macbeth wasn't actually all that? Will there be the next GOAT?
Daniel, I'll let you go. You guys were the ones chatting about it. So let
Okay,
you go
yeah,
first.
I don't know. I think it's an interesting question because it does seem insane that these kids are playing like this. But I do feel like, I also struggle with, like, sometimes it feels like, well, like, can disc golfers possibly do any better than they're doing right now? I think it'll be really interesting to see where courses go in the future. I think that will be kind of what shapes that conversation. I do think that the golf we have seen of like the Macbeth Wysocki era, and now, this new, the parody era, I think they're really, really good. I am really curious to see how much higher can the ceiling really be pushed than what it's at right now. I'm sure it can a little bit, but if I had to give an answer, I would say no. We won't look back on these guys and think like, these guys wouldn't be able to compete with the kids that are be playing as pros in 10, 15, 20 years.
I thought my take was going to be so interesting, and then Daniel just took it straight out. The problem, I think players level up faster and have leveled up faster than courses have, and so the margin for growth and of like the level of the game is minimized, right? Like if we're still playing Winthrop in 15 years, then there's only so much room for growth at Winthrop and leveling up, I feel. And so you'll have players that are more consistent and it's going to be condensed tighter at the top. But I think that's going to demand that we improve and continue to push what course design looks like in order to kind of match that game. And if we do, then I think there's going to be, then I think that discussion might be an interesting one. But I'll say and maybe this is just because I want to remind everyone that I got a chance to play around with Ken Climo. That guy still shreds. And I used to think oh yeah, it was very different when Climo played, but just watching him play disc golf was just insane. And his understanding of the game and how good he was it's still it felt like I was playing with just an absolute professional, right? And that didn't change, even though he's, you know, obviously not in his disc golf prime. And so I think that's going to be very similar probably in the next generation.
I think we will see players 1 to 25. Like the 25th player will be so much better than the 25th player of the current era.
That's a good point.
That like the floor is going to come up a lot. But
Yes,
I think the ceiling, like there's only so much you can do, you know,
with a Frisbee. Yeah.
I mean, it's just like Macbeth. Like, what is it when he was at his absolute peak, at his absolute best? What is it that you wanted him to do that he wasn't doing? He was an incredible putter. I mean, still is. Like when he's on from circle 2, he's ridiculous. And I guess the one knock would be that he doesn't throw it a mile. You know, he throws far, but he doesn't throw like ultra far. And I do think that in the future, we're going to see more people throwing ultra far. We're already seeing glimpses of that. And then that's a natural trend of both the equipment over time and players training over time and just like better ability to learn from technology and from, you know, better coaching. Like you look at some of the, I mean, look at Ellie Midling. Like she's ridiculous. She has incredible form for someone her age. And I don't think she's going to be the last player to emerge like that.
And that's true, but that's diminishing returns at some of our most value, like an unhonored courses, like MVP at Maple Hill. Like, I don't care if you get someone who throws 900 feet coming out soon, right? Like that, there are diminishing returns
I would care
of
about
distance.
that. I would care.
So this is an interesting thing. Maybe this is something that's like a bigger conversation for a different episode, but like, do we foresee any changes in how putting is done at the professional level? Namely, smaller baskets, rather than, you know, seeing how much farther players can throw, whereas making putting more similar to golf and getting differentiation that way. Like, do you think we'll ever get to that point? And then that, I think, could really change how we think of future players as well. I mean, like if players are, you know, putting on sniper baskets at the rate that, you know, players are putting now.
Daniel, smaller baskets is a phrase that's not allowed to be said on this show. You're not allowed to mention that here. That topic has been buried.
Oh my gosh! Okay, I missed those episodes. I guess.
Here's my prediction. At least in the short term, we won't see the baskets change. Maybe they'll make a slight adjustment, a little bit skinnier, but not like sharpshooter style. But I do think what's going to change, and maybe soon, is where the circle is. I think that pretty soon, on the Pro Tour level, they're going to stop allowing you to jump putt from outside of 33. I think it's going to be like a 65-foot, and you got to putt, you know, keep your stance from inside of circle 2, basically. It's just when people are opting to like mark their disc in such a way that they can jump putt, it shows you that it's too advantageous and we need to move it back so that it's just like not something where you can take advantage of, you know, what feels like a cheater move to pick up an extra 10 or 15% in terms of your putting percentage. Like I want to see people Gannon burring it from 75 feet. I think that's more impressive than watching somebody do some crazy jump putt. And I think that's going to change in the next like 3 years, to be honest.
I think so too. Especially when you're talking about guys who are, you know, 6'7", who jump and are stretching clear out and are halfway to the basket by the time they hit the ground.
Completely agree.
Yeah. That's the change.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, Daniel. Any final thoughts as you step away from our 2023 season?
Oh man, what a fun season. I think this is like my big thought about Kristen in particular. Like how cool is she that she's this dominant and we all like her? Right? Like she's not a villain. Like people are still out there rooting for her. And I feel like other athletes, and maybe it's different for like individual sports, but I feel like usually in sports when you see a dominant force quite as dominant as Kristen, people get bored with it and root against her. but it doesn't feel like we're at that. So that's kind of like my big story, is that Kristen is out there kicking ass and everyone's rooting for her to do it. But yeah, super fun season. Had a great time following the storylines. I love that I had a fantasy team like this to follow, even though they didn't do very well. It gave me some extra rooting interests, which I enjoyed. So can't wait to do it again next year. Thanks for including me on it this year, you guys. Super appreciate it.
Thanks for being here. Check out Daniel's podcast, Drafted. It's in wherever you get your podcasts. Daniel, we'd love to have you back for our Inside the Circle segment for Ultra-World Disc Golf subscribers, where we can talk a little bit about something we were discussing off the air about this era of disc golf versus the future of disc golf and how we might look back on this era. Sound good?
Sounds good, Charlie.
All right. Well, we will join you over Inside the Circle. Make sure you get yourself an Ultra-World Disc Golf subscription for less than $5 a month at discgolf.ultraworld.com/subscribe. For Josh Mansfield and Daniel Prentice, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you Thursday right here on The Upshot.